Today, I'm going to have a really timely conversation with Jorge Arteaga on how to be a good bystander. Jorge, you pivoted so fast to join me on this with everything that's been happening in the world with the events in Atlanta, ongoing, we're seeing a spike, and you and I talked about this, but introduce yourself and Hollaback and the work that you all are up to, because it's amazing and we could all learn from you. And I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for having us. We're grateful. Well, I'm Jorge Arteaga. I'm the deputy director at Hollaback, and Hollaback is a people-powered global movement to end harassment in all of its forms, and we're doing that in a few ways these days. Some of them is like our trainings that we're currently offering. We've actually had over 30,000 people register to our bystander intervention to support the AAPI community training. And the fact that that happened over 4 days, that was just like phenomenal. The amount of support that we're receiving. But we do bystander intervention and a number of other topics. We also talk about how these simple tactics could also be used in the workplace. Um, and then we do some conflict de-escalation work and resilience building, and also some tools to mitigate some implicit bias folks might be showing up with, right? And then overall, right, we have our global site leader program where we've trained local youth in other cities around the globe to bring the movement to end harassment to their communities. We have Heart Mob, which is our online harassment platform tool. So if as our lives have drastically gone virtual and we spend even more time online, I didn't think it was possible before, the pandemic, that I would spend even more time online. But if you're experiencing online harassment, or even if you want to be an ally, because you could also still use the 5Ds in a virtual setting, we have resources around that as well, where you could figure out if you wanted to report something or how you might go forward about protecting yourself in digital spaces. And then I
That's
think
a
the most
lot.
important as a historian is storytelling. We've collected over 15,000 stories of harassment in an effort to raise awareness. So yes, it is a lot. You're correct.
Well, it's so fantastic because, so thank you all for the work that you're doing. It's amazing. And it's why I wanted to so quickly um, get you on the series so that we could talk about this. So how does our personal experience impact how we show up as a bystander?
Well, ultimately, right, we're not singular human beings. We have multiple identities. We wear multiple hats. Pedestrian or citizen is one of them. Workplace employees, another one. Mom, dad, for me, Afro Latino, gay, you name them, right? Like we have multiple identities and hats that we wear. So that affects ultimately our experiences, not only how we experience public spaces, workspaces, right? But also how we're perceived, how situations might appear to us. And yeah, our experiences play a huge role, even in our ability to be a bystander, right? Because there's definitely, uh, when folks think of, well, jumping in to be a bystander, right? Like, aren't there some risk involved? And absolutely there are some risks that might be involved, but that is why there's multiple tools, right? And what we really want to help people do is start to think and create this framework, right? And first think about your own identity, your personal identity, right? Who are you as a human? How has that affected your experience, right? And then
Yeah.
also, how might that affect your ability to be a bystander, an active bystander, and do something whenever you see some form of disrespectful behavior, harassment, or
Yeah, I know it seems obvious to you, Jorge, but I had never thought about how intersectionality and who I am impacts how I show up as a bystander. So that was, in our pre-conversation, such a light bulb moment for me. Like, well, of course it does.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sure, for
Of
sure.
course it does. Um, so I know that you talk about the spectrum of harm.
Mm-hmm,
Can you talk about that and how, and I love this idea that we don't have to be a superhero
mm-hmm,
that you
mm-hmm.
shared with me. So like
Yeah,
dig
yeah.
in, dig in on that.
Yeah, we talk about it's a spectrum of disrespect, right? And what automatically people, when they think of, oh, bystander intervention methodology, they think of being a superhero, right? Of like you have to do this huge gesture and put yourself in harm's way. And actually, you don't, right? There's multiple ways that you can show up to support someone in different settings, right? In public spaces as well as in the workplace. So what we like to, what we look at the spectrum, right? Think of it as these sort of disrespectful, microaggressive behaviors that aren't overtly racist or sexist or any of the atrocious acts that we see like in the media, right? But they're more kind of everyday jokes that may be made or just comments like, where are you really from? Or no, what country do you come from? You're not really from here, right? You know, assuming that folks of a certain identity come from certain area or certain country, right? Uh, we look at the behavior there, and what we're saying is you can intervene in those situations, right? When it's the stakes are much lower, because what we hope is that over time, right, or what we've seen, not even hope, what we've seen is that over time, when you start to get in early, you start to show people that that behavior is not okay, right? It's not
Yeah.
accepted. We don't tolerate that here, right? We respect each other, identities, the intersections, of which we lie on. We respect all of it. And then you stop it before it ever becomes these much worse, scenarios or situations that you deal with, like racism and sexism and xenophobia and hate, right? So yeah, ultimately when you're looking at conflict, I mean, in instances where it's extremely violent, or you fear for your safety, we actually are asking you as a bystander, please preserve your own safety first, right? Especially in public spaces. Think about yourself, put yourself first, and because then you want to be able to show up in the best way for the person who needs your support, right? Because ultimately, our methodology, the 5Ds, focuses on the person who's experiencing the harm in the moment.
So I want to unpack this idea about like those getting in on those microaggressions
Yes,
and
yes.
because that's so right. We don't do that here. That's not funny. That's not okay, right? Those can be really simple, fast.
Mhm.
How do I how do I make sure that I'm not trying to play savior,
Mm,
right? Like,
mm,
Jorge, do you really need my help?
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
Or right. So what's that balance?
Yeah,
When, is it saying something like, I've got your back, let me know if you want me to step in, or like I see that, or what is give me the best practice there, because we don't need a whole bunch of people, particularly white people, thinking they need to be white saviors.
agree, agree, agree. And that's actually something that comes up in our trainings. And what we talk about is that ultimately, in this methodology, again, we're really focusing ourselves on the person and their experience. So if you don't want to play savior, one is don't focus on what you're feeling in terms of how you want to help this person, right? Like, oh, this is so bad, I need to say something about it, right? Because then you're really focusing on what you're feeling about it, right? You're not really focusing on the effects, the impact that is having on the person who's on the receiving end of that harm. So yeah, something like, I saw what happened. Let me know if, you need me to say anything, or if you would like me to support what you said. We talk about document as one of the 5Ds, like just a quick message, right? Like a little note of like, hey, I saw what happened, or an email to the person who experienced the harm. And then let them choose, like, hey, just wanted you to know I saw this. If you choose to do anything with it, I can support you. Now, of course, when we're talking about workplace settings, there's a whole bunch of implications, right, around uh, folks who mandatory have to report when they see, so managers above, if you see it, even if you think it's a joke, you still have to report harassment if you witness it. But yeah, not being the savior, right? In public spaces, not being the savior. And I would say even in the workplace, looks like definitely the intention in that moment. And we know intentions aren't magic, right? And bystander intervention, of course, happens in the drop of a hat, right? Like we're asking you to do something, sometimes in the span of like 30 seconds or a minute. So the intention should always be, I need to support this person and show up for them in this moment and help them in the way that is best for them. And I think if you keep that, you hold that with you, right? Like this is not about the person causing the harm. That might be a conversation later, and not even that you have with them, right? Or if you choose to be a direct intervener, you might say something directly, but then ultimately focus yourself on the person who's experiencing it and showing solidarity with them, right? You definitely though want to keep in mind, right, that your actions may have an impact that you may not even be aware of, right? Because we talk about bystander and the identities that we hold, and therefore, based on those identities and the experiences we hold, we might have certain biases or privileges we're not even aware of, right? That might be informing what we're seeing and how we're choosing to intervene or interact with it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like, could there be a quick, I see this, let me know what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm thinking in particular in the workplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where and oftentimes I'm curious too, Jorge, about so many people after the fact think, oh, I wish I would have said, or I wish I would have done. What's your feeling about, and again, this isn't the situation that's escalated. We're still at the microaggression.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I go back to the person, center it back and say, I saw that, I heard that. Next time, what would you like me to do? Or would you like me to do anything? Or is it, what do you need?
Mm-hmm. So
Is
that's
it better?
sorry, I'm sorry
No, go.
Yeah, that's actually so one of our forms of intervention, delay. So delay is, checking in with the person after the situation has passed, right? You may not always feel comfortable in that moment speaking up for whatever the reason is. We're not telling you to set those aside and do something, right? No, own, honor, and hold true whatever it is that you're feeling, whatever's bringing you trepidation around intervening, so that then you can choose what's the best way of action or what's the best way forward for you in that moment. So delay is the option of, maybe I did see something I didn't feel comfortable intervening in. You can still do something. So yes, afterward, checking in with that person and saying, hey, I did see what happened. It's not okay. What can I do to support you? How can I show up?
Okay. And then they may say, hey, I need you to go talk to that person. And they may say, I got it. Or next time, knowing that you've got my back, whatever it might be. Okay. So you've alluded to the 5 Ds.
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
So the 5 Ds, I'll give them to you quickly. I don't want to give away too much, but folks, encouraging you to come out and take our trainings. We have distract. So distract is creating a distraction to de-escalate the situation. And you might do that in a few ways, right? You might, in a public setting, drop something, maybe walk up to the person and ask them for directions, or can I help you with something, or act like you know them. In a workplace setting, distraction might mean, in some work meetings, folks are like, okay, well, let's go ahead and take a pause and we're going to give everyone 2 minutes to share, right? Because then you're kind of breaking the situation, acknowledging that everyone hasn't held space in the room, and then giving everyone that equal attention. You have delegate, which is finding someone else to help you. In most settings, even I'd say in the workplace, and I would say, if it's something like finding the person, hey, did you see what happened? Do you feel comfortable saying something, right? Or can you step in? I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying something. We've had some folks be creative and they said, I delegated with a distraction. So I told that person, hey, can you go and call so and so to my office after this meeting? I need to talk to them about something, but it was really to kind of break up the situation that they were in.
I like that.
So
I like that sort of doubling up on the two, like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
hey, can you take some notes on the whiteboard, or whatever
Yeah,
it might
yeah,
be. Okay.
exactly, exactly. And then in public spaces, the bystander next to you who necessarily may not know that the 5Ds exist, right? Get their help. If you're, in a certain setting, you might want to go to a person who's in a position of authority in that setting. So a bartender, if you're on an airplane, maybe it's a flight attendant, and asking them for help in doing something. And then, also people always ask, well, what about the police? Well, I say use your discretion. If it's an extreme violent situation, you don't feel safe, and you fear for the safety of the other person, you see that they're in clear visible danger, because again, right, some of these watch outs of a bystander, you might be interpreting something that's not actually happening there. um, then you can call. But if you can, check in with the person who's experiencing the harm. Check in with them if you can and say, hey, do you need me to call 911, right? So that's delegate. We have document and document. Yes.
Can I stop you on delegate for a
Yeah.
second? It's always that the first person, right? It's like the first one to step forward is the hardest, and it seems like it'd be much easier than to get somebody else involved. If I've distracted, and then I can get somebody else involved, because I've already taken that first step. I've set wheels in motion. There are probably other people that
Mhm.
are seeing, experiencing, don't know the 5Ds, or are afraid, or any number of things. So I think that's the delegation seems like an easy way you start that ball rolling.
Yeah, to push people into action. Yeah, totally.
Okay,
We
so
talk about,
distract to delegate.
yeah,
Number three.
document. So creating documentation of the situation. And this one is a bit tricky. So you want to, but if you're in public spaces, in most spaces, you want to check your local laws for consenting, party laws around filming things in public. But I'm pretty sure, like in most places here in New York City, for example, we have just one party needs to consent to the video, right? So that would most likely be whoever's filming it. You can film the situation. And then once you're done filming it, give it to the person who experienced the harm and let them handle the situation or decide how they want to report that, right? Like, we don't want to further traumatize that person. We want to restore as much of their choice and agency back by allowing them to choose how they want to use that footage.
I
Um,
love that. Versus, again, it'd be easy to be like, look what I
what did
right?
I
Like,
do?
center it back on.
Back
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
person, yeah. And then, in a workplace setting, it's different, right? There are, in some cases, as I mentioned before, where you have to report. So the documentation has to be created. But, in cases where you don't, like I said, maybe a quick email, a little note of what happened, maybe noting the time, time of day, maybe after what meeting was it, what was the context, and then just giving it to that person, right? As a form of having documentation and supporting them.
One of the things that we talk about sort of in that workplace around the documentation, and this is, again, I'm taking it back to microaggression before it gets to the really egregious stuff,
Mhm.
is we suggest having a team check-in
Mm,
around how things are going. And if I'm maybe in my meeting notes, right, I can go back, or I've seen some things and I can say, here's some things that I saw this last month in generically, right? I saw us interrupting each other, or I saw some, comments about hair and appearance, or whatever it might be.
mhm,
How can we do better?
mhm.
Right. So it's everybody saying, if we're going to do those check-ins around how we doing around inclusion, belonging, right, and holding space for one another, maybe it doesn't escalate to the HR level, but it's keeping notes. And also, like, on the flip side, catching people doing things right. Like, here are some things that we did really right this month
Yeah.
or this week.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think around documenting, because again, bystander intervention is very in that moment, right? But a lot of what you named is uh, using that then to go and do the work to figure out why we have these behaviors happening, these disrespectful behaviors happening in the workplace, right? In that moment, though, you're certainly right that, you know, you, in most cases, we like tell you, I mean, unless you feel like you have to, but if you can keep the conversation with you and a colleague and it comes from a place of like, hey, you know, you did this thing to me and it made me feel this way, right? And I would like for you to, whatever it is, you know, whatever it is that feels right for you. um, we talk about some of that, especially in our bystander intervention in the workplace, because there is some of that, right? Like these, I like to think of the folks that you're working with, you spend in some cases more time with them than you do with your own family, right? That if you can keep the conversation here, and you feel that it will lead to something, that you ultimately should do that. I think the flip side of that coin, though, is then also setting people up to be able to receive that feedback, right? So we have that conversation as well, right? Recognizing that, like, surprise, we all have implicit bias. And it takes work to undo. It's not this scarlet letter that you've been branded with, right? That there's just some work that you're going to have to do to undo that, whether it's teachings, actively acknowledging certain behaviors you have, and taking steps to really try to, you know, I won't say correct them because that feels, but, you know, shift, right? Like pivot,
Grow, right? Grow
grow,
through it.
yes,
Yep.
grow and learn, yes, yes. So,
Okay, so we have, I'm not taking notes. Distract, delegate, document.
and then we have delay. So delay is what we talked about earlier, which is waiting until after the situation has passed, right? Delaying, right? And then, you know, checking in with the person. And that one, it's for a number of reasons, right? As a bystander, you also want to think of, where might I be most helpful to this person, right? Maybe you're like Emily, my colleague and our co-founder, executive director. She's like, delay is like for the folks who are like good best friends, right? Like the people who like to listen. She's like, for folks like me who I've, you know, been doing this work for such a long time, have shared, you know, space and stories with folks, and feel that I might be in more of service to them, you know, after, and checking in on them and saying, how are you? What can we do to support you? I know this hurts, right? Acknowledging that what they went through was not okay, and that, you know, it hurts. And then offering your support. And you can offer your support, you know, hey, do you want me to sit with you? Can I call someone? Do you need to take a walk, right? And at work, that looks similar, right? At work, it's maybe knocking on the door after that tough meeting and saying, hey, I saw what happened in there. You know, I'm totally sorry that was your experience. Do you need me to cover a meeting for you so you can take some time to regroup, right? Do you want to go and take a walk or grab some coffee? You know, finding ways to be there, showing up for the person in the moment. Or
And then are you also asking about that? Okay, if this happens next time, how do you want me to show up for you?
I think in that moment, right
Not yet.
in that moment, yeah, not yet, right? Like we want to, again, center yourself on that person and their immediate needs. Like what, you know, that person's is probably maybe reeling or experiencing some sort of shock or some sort of trauma from the experience they've had. So you want to be supportive to them in that moment. And what can I do for you now that'll be in support of you? And then, you know, later on, if you wanted to offer that additional support, that, you know, that always helps. Is always good to offer more help.
Awesome. All right, last D.
All right, direct. And direct, you know, I love all of the 5Ds. Naturally, I'm a direct intervener. Um, and I hold it near and dear to my heart, not because it's, you know, my go-to or my superpower, but because I feel like there's a real generative way to do direct without, you know, folks immediately think, oh, I need to confront this person and tell them everything that they did wrong and read them down and all of that. And it's not about any of that, right? It's about in that moment saying, hey, what you did was inappropriate, made that person feel uncomfortable. that joke seemed racist, sexist, right? Whatever it was, you offended that person, and you need to give them some space. You should apologize. Yeah, we should have a discussion about why those things are not okay in our environment. You should have, maybe you should read our policy book, whatever that conversation looks like, but then stopping it, right? Like you don't want to go any further than you state what you saw and why it was wrong or the harm they could have been causing. Give them an action. You should apologize. You should not say that. Give them some space, and then turn yourself and center yourself on the person experiencing the harm, right? To helping them in that moment. Um, it's really easy, I think, in direct to get away with yourself, escalate the situation.
Yeah.
And, we don't want that ultimately because we want the person experiencing harm to feel safe, right? And
Yeah,
care.
yeah. Back to, I love that. Back to centering.
Mhm.
How do I do that in a way that doesn't escalate, right? That doesn't push somebody into either fight or flight, or
Mhm.
is that for later, Jorge? Like I'm just right now just shutting this down right here, and then we can have the conversation later. We talk about psychological safety and how to get people to grow through things.
Mhm.
What I think I'm hearing this right is that's not right then. That's let's let's be direct, let's stop it, let's turn back, and then we can go have that deeper conversation down the road.
Yeah, that's correct. And
Okay.
but also, what I'd like to say is that in being direct, right? You may not feel comfortable being so, what is it, bold or like just saying, blatantly calling someone racist right in the middle of a work meeting. That probably wouldn't go over well.
Right.
So, there is a way though for you to say, hey, so and so, what did you mean by this comment that you made, right? And
Yep.
when you phrase, or what did you mean when you said, and then restate what they said, what you do is give that person a moment to like hear back what they just said in front of everyone. And if
Yeah.
they're going to walk it back, give them a chance, right, to walk it back or explain themselves, or maybe that is what they meant, right? But there's ways to still be direct, and I won't
Yeah.
say call out, but name the behavior, and not feel like you're being as confrontational.
Can you give me 5 phrases? I mean, is that like, what did you mean by that? Or can you explain that? Or that's
Yeah.
not funny.
Yeah,
That's
or
not cool.
like I'm trying to understand how was this comment funny? Or could you explain to me, and you want to make sure that the questions aren't loaded with your assumptions already in them.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
oh, could you explain to me how that was not a sexist and da joke, right? Because then you're imposing how you feel about the situation in it. And what you really want to do is give that person a moment to step into what they said, right? Like, are you going to own this thing that you said? And if you are, then we need to be clear about exactly what is it that you said, because then I think that sparks some conversation, right? The conversation is either actually that's not values aligned, that's what we, or maybe that's a learning moment for that person, right? Like you're, oh, hey, you may have meant this, but what you said, right? This is the part where we say, you honor the intent, but you have to own the impact, right? Where you might have said something and just put your foot in your mouth, you didn't mean to, but now you have to own that impact and step into it and be willing to make the real amends.
Oh my gosh, this has been so phenomenal. Um, so I don't have to be a superhero, right?
No.
I think about the spectrum of harm, right? And get in there on the early things, understand how my identity impacts. This is how I learned, Jorge. So I'm going
No,
back
that's
with
fine.
this.
That's fine.
The 5 Ds of distract, delegate, document, delay, direct.
Mhm.
And always, always, always go back to centering on the person that's experiencing the harm
Yeah.
and what they need. Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, and I'm going to put this in the comments as well. How can people sign up for your trainings? Where can they find out more about the amazing work that y'all are doing? And again, thank you for the amazing work y'all are doing.
Oh,
How can we all become better bystanders out in the world and in the workplace?
yes, come and get trained. And once you get trained, go and tell 10 more people that you got trained and get them to come to the trainings. You can register to our trainings at ihollaback.org / get trained. Or you could just go to ihollaback.org. And if you scroll a little bit down, one of the first things you'll see is get trained, because we want to make sure folks are coming to our trainings. We do have a bunch of dates that we added and expanded our capacity to meet the moment and offer to folks. But we do know there are some workplaces or some universities or organizations that might want to bring this in to their organization, and we can do that as well. I will say we are a bit, everyone's knocking, and we are a mighty, mighty team, but capacity is a thing, right? We want to take care of our folks who are on the front lines of this work in our organization. So you reach out to us. You can email us at holla@ihollaback.org, or you can contact us through our Get Trained page as well. There's a contact form there. And give us some time. We will get back to you with some dates. We have been scheduling dates furiously and diligently, and making sure that we are able to bring this out to whoever wants it, needs it, is craving it.
Well, and I'll say, as a mighty team ourselves, like you want to meet the moment, and y'all, this isn't going away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe this might be training for this summer, this fall, whenever. Just don't give up on it, because and what I love about organizations bringing this in, Jorge, is this idea of a common language and common tools.
Yeah.
When you have a common language and common tools, everybody is like, oh, I understand all these things. We all have the way of going about this, so that it becomes like breathing in the organization. So
yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I learned so much. I will be signing up for training. I'm telling everybody about it.
Yes.
And the world needs what you're doing. And thank you so much.
We appreciate you. Thank you for having us.
Give me one last truth bomb.
Truth bomb. About myself or the organization?
About being a good bystander.
Oh, being a good bystander. A good one, a good one, a good one. You don't have to do all 5 Ds, right? We're not asking you to do everything, but you need to do at least one thing, just one thing, right? If we all were able to step in and do at least that one thing when we saw someone experiencing that harm, we making a change together. We're changing the world and the way we interact with folks.
I felt that in my whole body, Jorge. So thank you. Everybody, get out there and get trained. Give Hollaback some love for all the work that they're doing, and get out there and do the next right thing.